guys, it's Reagan and welcome to my January wrap-up. Now for the month of January, I have to say, I started the year out with quite the bang. I read quite a bit. I completed 6 total books and got halfway through a 7th one, which is almost 800 pages, so that's like almost a 7th book in itself, but like, who's counting? But anyway, without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right in. So the first book I'm gonna talk about is the Peruse-topia Book Club Pick of the Month for the month of January. And this month, Sasha and I wanted to read The Wicked King by Holly Black. This is book 2 to the Cruel Prince series, which is a fae fantasy-centered story that I read last year and really loved. Great news, the second one was also highly entertaining and I cannot wait for the 3rd installment because boy oh boy is this a dark, delicious, and absolutely captivating fantasy series. This story follows our main character Jude, who is 100% human but was kidnapped when she was a young child by her stepfather to live and grow up in the fae world. There, she and her twin sister are basically tormented for fun by the fae. But because her father is a pretty powerful individual, no one can actually outwardly go against her or her family, so they do it all in secret. Jude, her entire life, has always craved a way to find her own power within this very frivolous, fake, and dark world. And the first novel, she does this by becoming a spy, and she kind of gets stuck in the middle of a bunch of fae court politics and ultimately in the middle of the fight of a lot of different people trying to vie for the throne. The second novel takes place literally directly after the end of the first book, which had quite the explosive ending, and man, oh man, it's just so good. Another component to this series is it has kind of like a hate to love to hate relationship that is done so well. For me personally, that's one of the most addicting YA style romances, but usually the hate to love thing is resolved within the first book. But guys, we're going into book 3 and I'm still on the edge of my seat just waiting. Yes, if you were looking for a steamy, dark, very, very corrupt and delicious fae-centered YA fantasy story, I would highly recommend picking this up. It's definitely one that will keep you on the edge of your seat. It's just so entertaining. I'm flipping through the pages, and again, I'm just trash for everyone in this series. So I really did like the second installment very much. Did not have second book syndrome at all. I don't know how I'm gonna wait for the next book in this series, but I'm just gonna have to. So yeah, I gave this book a 4.5 out of 5 stars. Great start to the month. Next book I picked up was Renegades by Marissa Mayer. This was actually the first book I completed in the year 2019. This was a book I was really looking forward to reading. I had heard such fantastic things and the premise really caught my attention. It is a science fiction superhero centered YA story and it was said to be very exciting, very fast paced, the romance was top notch, etc, etc. So I heard all those things, I wanted to pick it up immediately. The book is set in a world where basically individuals began to gain powers one day, and society, when this first began to happen, oppressed those individuals. They're very scared of them, and then a group of people who had superpowers rose up. They were called anarchists, kind of overthrew the governments around the world. Chaos kind of ensued from there. But then another group of superheroes kind of appeared called the Renegades, who brought order and peace back to the land, and they are kind of a ruling body of superheroes. We follow 2 main characters in this world. One was raised by anarchists and is part of the anarchist group, and one is the son of 2 very powerful people within the Renegades organization and is kind of the poster child to this Renegades group. We follow these individuals as their lives cross paths in a very unlikely fashion, as one would expect. And essentially, both of our main characters kind of have to face their own perspectives, values, and essentially how they were raised and brought up to believe, to basically realize that there's more than one point of view and more than one way to approach things within the world, and there's not just one perfect solution to every problem, and that life, government, society is a very nuanced thing. Ultimately, I liked this book. I did not love it. I was kind of honestly disappointed by it. I was just really expecting to be drawn into the story immediately, could not put it down. I found the government and kind of this society post-overthrow, now ruled by superheroes, really complicated and therefore interesting government situation. But at the end of the day, I felt like this book kind of just hit the surface. I wanted there to be more in-depth perspective on all of these topics. This book approach, but didn't like tackle fully. So therefore I gave this book like a 3 out of 5 stars, maybe a 2.75. I just really wanted to love it, and when I did it just was like soul crushing. After that, I picked up Keeper of the Lost Cities Exile, which is book 2 to the Lost Cities series, which is a very long middle grade fantasy series that I started at the end of 2018. And guys, I am loving this book series so much. It's just like incredible. It keeps offering more and more. I wasn't even expecting from it from a middle grade perspective, like on emotional stakes level, like so many great things. But the sequel takes place again right after the end of the first one. If you're not familiar, this is a series that follows our main character Sophie, who grew up in the human world, and she's always been very special. She has a photographic memory, and more than that, she can actually read people's minds, and she's been keeping this secret her entire life. But then one day she meets a boy named Fitz, who also can read people's minds, and there she discovers she's actually an elf. And so she's swept away to a whole new world, a whole new school, magic school, and basically is uncovering and discovering a whole new side of herself, a whole new culture, and meets all sorts of new friends and like parental figures and things like that. And it's just incredible. I really loved the second book. I think it really upped the ante even more in the world. I also would say that the series is a lot darker than I was expecting. I mean, the topics of loss and grieving and like understanding your own pain, but also other people's pain. So empathy is really something that's touched on and done quite in depth. And I really liked how the author approached it, but also it touched on topics of like, I don't know, government seeking information and the impact of like keeping someone in isolation and innocent before proving guilty, and like all these types of deeper topics that again was not expecting to encounter in a middle grade series that really added quite the rich layer to this book. I really want to read the third one, plan on reading it very soon. But yeah, these are just so great, to be honest. Like a huge cast of characters, great best friends, great parental figures, great like adult figures are also present in this series, which I just love. But yeah, really liked it. 5 out of 5 stars, a great second book to a series. From there, I picked up a bit of a surprise for the month, and that was Crazy Rich Asians by Kevin Kwan. This was a book that I just kind of spontaneously picked up and then immediately picked up to read. It is a very famous novel, which also has a movie adaptation, which I've seen, and it was great. But this is the story of mostly Rachel Chu and her boyfriend, Nicholas Young, and they have been dating for a long time. They've met and basically lived together in New York, and then Nicholas kind of comes to Rachel and is like, hey, let's go back to Singapore for the summer. I want to show you my family. I want to show you my family home. Rachel's expecting kind of like a humble, normal family existence. Turns out Nicholas Young is like one of the richest people in the world, and she's thrown into this like huge family complex situation where everyone is judging everyone, gossiping about everyone. Money is a huge central factor. I mean, the kinds of things these people do to each other, but also just do for fun, is just a wild thing to read. It's kind of dubbed as the modern Pride and Prejudice, and I would really agree. I mean, there's just like absolutely luxurious and glamorous moments that happen in this book, but also it's highly entertaining. I mean, it's like a contemporary rom-com, but has all these added layers of family drama, family dynamics that I've never experienced before because I'm so far from Singaporean royalty. But on top of this, this book is also multi-perspective, so you're not just following Rachel and Nicholas's story, but also different people within the family, from the mother to cousins, which just adds so many interesting and rich layers. You really fall in love with a lot of these characters, and also hate some of these characters as well. It's just such a fascinating family story with romance and like also a lot of history. Like, I was talking to someone about this book and I felt like I was reading a reality show, but also learning a lot at the same time, because throughout this book there's also footnotes and there's so many cultural references to Singaporean like history and like cultural roots, but also food and language and all sorts of things. So I felt like I was just learning a lot about not only this family, but the cultures that they live in. And it was fascinating from page 1 to the last page. And I bought the next 2 books in this series. I'm a huge fan, so I'm definitely gonna continue on to reading this throughout the next couple of months because it's just so great. Had a smile on my face the entire time. Absolutely hilarious and outrageous. I gave this book a 5 out of 5 stars. super entertaining. Glad I picked it up. From there, I ventured on into my reread of the Mistborn Trilogy. I completed The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson, and I'm currently halfway through The Well of Ascension by Brandon Sanderson. These were my commute books this month. And guys, it was such a joy to pick these back up and reread. It's actually been, I want to say, over 4 years since I originally read this series. Because of that, I honestly had forgotten most of what happened, but I also wanted to reread them with kind of fresh eyes, with a lot more Cosmere knowledge, now that I've read The Way of Kings and Warbreaker and a lot more books that exist within this universe. I wanted to reread them with kind of that perspective. And I honestly feel like I'm loving them more the second time. I mean, these books are just the best. And I definitely can reaffirm my opinion. If you've never read Brandon Sanderson and you want to read some of his adult high fantasies, start with the Mistborn Trilogy, because it's not crazy long, but it's so impactful from a plot and character perspective that you cannot put it down. The first book is basically set in a world where the evil guy one, the Dark Lord, has been ruling this land for 1,000 years, and basically ash falls out of the sky, nothing can grow, everyone is living a miserable and terrible existence. And a group of ragtag individuals look to try to overthrow this Dark Lord. Another component to the series that just makes it great is the magic system itself. It's centered around the idea of consuming metals, and basically you can either consume one metal and activate against that power, or you can consume all of them and you're called Mistborn. And from there we follow one, and probably I would consider our main character Vin, who is kind of this very poor street urchin, kind of trying to get by, trying to not be noticed. And she's kind of discovered by this thieving group because she herself is a Mistborn, which is incredibly rare. So she kind of joins this plot to overthrow this Dark Lord. It's just so good, guys. Like, it has such great magic, such a great political and historical system, multiple perspectives, a huge and lovable cast of characters, and absolutely a mind-blowing plot at the end of the day. I'm halfway through the second one as a reread, and it's just reminding me how much I love this original trilogy so much. So yeah, obviously 5 out of 5 stars for both of these. I haven't even finished my reread of The Well of Ascension, but I know what happened, so like, it's a 5 out of 5 stars, okay? And the very last book I completed for the month of January was The Assassination of Barger Spurge, which is a super weird, mostly illustrated novel that I also picked up in the month of January, but it was quite the delight kind of a book. It's basically set in a world where there are two kingdoms that hate each other. There's a long history of warfare, misunderstanding, and just like overall dislike for one another. And it's the Elven Kingdom and the Goblin Kingdom. Our main character, Barger Spurge, is a spy sent from the Elven Kingdom as an emissary to the Goblin Kingdom to basically steal their secrets, deliver this gift to try to like broker a peace between the two worlds. But little does he know, he's actually sent there to secretly assassinate the leader of the Goblin Empire. During his time in the Goblin Empire, he stays with a goblin historian like himself, and basically they're supposed to foil each other because they're from like two different kingdoms who hate each other, but they love and study and do the exact same thing. They have an incredible amount in common, and ultimately, like, you want them to form this unlikely friendship and try to bring peace between these two, like, fighting lands. My favorite part about this book is actually the illustrations. They're done in kind of a medieval engraving style, which is really cool. But also what's so cool about the photos is they're actually transmissions, like spy transmissions from Barger Spurge. So everything that he sees, we read as a scene, and then we see him visualize it and send it back to the Elven Kingdom as like information. Illustrated in this book, I read at the end, which I think is really, really cool. He basically wanted to play with the idea that the pictures aren't showing what's happening, but instead a very warped perspective, right? Because Barger Spurge is going in and experiencing everything around him with a huge bias against what he's witnessing. So it's not actually like truth, you know? So it's like a warped perspective through images, and I thought that was a really cool thing to kind of play with. And you'll see the images kind of change throughout the book as well as Barger Spurge kind of realizes more around him. But I thought this was a really cool and clever little book. It was very odd. The writing style was hilarious, and it kind of felt like a fairy tale-esque sort of style. Like, I could see this definitely being animated. Yeah, ultimately I really enjoyed it. It was weird, but I liked it, and I would give it like a 3.75 out of 5 stars. Very entertaining and a very quick read. Alrighty guys, those are all of the books I read in the month of January. Let me know down below some books you've read this month, as I would love to know, and I'll see you guys soon with another video soon. Goodbye!